We are very excited today to have a panel called Why Shorts Matter. We're going to be talking about short filmmaking and the process of short filmmaking and how that can influence not only your feature work, but also getting discovered. Our moderator today is Nathan Zellner. And we have panelists Damien Chazelle, who's the director of Whiplash, Kat Candler, director of Hellion, Christopher Radcliff, director of Jonathan's Chest, as well as Steve Farneth from Cinetic and Cullen Conley from ICM. Everyone give a warm welcome. This is going to be very conversational and fun. Are we short? Oh, there. You get a stool. You get a fancy stool. So everyone gather up close. It's going to be very conversational and fun this afternoon. Thank you, Nathan.
Hello, everybody. So we're here to discuss why short films matter, why you should do them, why they're important in your career, why they're important to the industry, all that kind of good stuff. My background, I'm here with a feature this year called Kumiko the Treasure Hunter, but I've been at Sundance a handful of times with short films, like about 5 times, which is kind of gross to admit. But we have obviously I think they're very important, and I think that they serve a purpose. And me and my brother, who I work with, have learned a lot from them, and gained a lot of career experience and met a lot of people through them. So there's definitely a reason why I'm glad you all are here to get that kind of information. And we have a very well qualified folks on the panel today. So I'd like for each of them to kind of introduce themselves and give a little bit of background of what brings them to Sundance this year. So Damien, if you want to start off.
Cool. I directed I brought a short last year here that was basically, and the hope with the short was to use it to raise sort of awareness and attention and ultimately money for a feature. So now I'm here this year with the feature version of that short, and so yeah, it's been fun. That's it. Last year was my first time here.
And what's the feature?
Whiplash.
Oh, sorry. My name is Kat Candler, and I was here in 2012 with a short film called Hellion, which we actually made Hellion just because it hadn't made anything in a little while, and I really wanted to get kind of back onto set and just kind of play and make something with my friends. And we had no expectations whatsoever for the short besides just making something we were really excited about. And we got that phone call from Sundance, which kind of feels like it changed your life a little bit. And after that, we had Black Metal here last year as well, and then we're here with the feature version of Hellion.
My name is Christopher Radcliff, and I am here this year with a new short film called Jonathan's Chest. And I first came to Sundance in 2011 with a short film called The Strange Ones. Yeah, like Kat said, that was definitely sort of like a big moment. It was sort of like my first sort of work that had gotten out into the world in a big way, like being at Sundance and like meeting people. And it's definitely sort of changed the trajectory of, I guess, my career and whatnot. But like it's something like that I'm also in the process of writing the feature version of that now. So yeah, cool.
I'm Steve Farneth. I work at Cinetic Media. We I guess we're best known here at Sundance for selling films, selling North American distribution rights, but we do a lot of things from managing filmmakers to representing financiers and producers and putting together financing for films as well. And I guess as a way of further introduction, I met Nathan and his brother several years ago when they were here with a short film called The Sasquatch Birth Journal 2, which is on YouTube and is absolutely as astonishing as the title suggests. But from that short here at Sundance, that led to conversations and collaborations on different projects over several years, which is part of what we're talking about here today.
And I'm Cullen Conley. I'm an agent at ICM Partners, but have been there about a year, and before that I worked at the Sundance Institute in the writer-director lab. So looking for emerging talent and supporting them on their first or second features, and then parlayed that into becoming an agent.
So actually, that's one thing I want to start off with first is like the labs, and I know that Hellion was through the labs as well. Did either of you two have you had any experience with the labs? And Kat, also, if you can talk to us about your experience, because how this short film helped you get in. If it helped you get into the lab, or that sort of process.
So we were here in 2012, and Kelly Williams, who's sitting over there, one of my producers, he went to the producers workshop or get together or something like that, right? And met Ann Lai, who runs the producers lab, and applied for it. And let me kind of backtrack a little bit. After we shot the short in the summer of 2011, I knew I wanted to make a feature out of it. I loved the world that we had created, and I loved these characters so much. And I started going down to Southeast Texas, where Kelly is from, and started using that place as a character in the film, and the story just kind of grew and grew and grew. So when I found out I got into Sundance, November, I think, of 2011, it was one of those moments where it's I had been writing the feature, draft of Hellion, and I knew by the time I got to Sundance in January, I had to have a first draft of this script, because it was something you want to talk about and all of that kind of stuff. And so Kelly applied for the producers lab and got in and was there summer of 2012. And it's just that was the second sort of stamp of approval on this project, on the feature. And the lab process was just it was phenomenal. They spend hours going through your script, and we came home with 30 pages of notes on the script, which was absolutely terrifying, and the most wonderful notes you could possibly think of from amazing people. But the lab was sort of our second huge legitimizing piece to getting the feature off the ground.
And it helped, obviously, having the short here before, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you go in with samples of, having a short for the feature, even though it wasn't our initial intention. You kind of have a style and a vision and an aesthetic of what you're going for, and that helped tremendously.
Yeah, I'll just weigh in because I wanted Kat and Damien separately to come to the writers' lab, and I did not accomplish either, unfortunately, because it is a very competitive process. But it was because I saw both of their short films and saw incredible talent and promise as a filmmaker that then we reached out to them each separately and said, if you have a feature you're developing, I'd love to talk to you about it and go down that road. And the selection process is complicated and tricky, and I didn't always win my battles. But yeah, that's really how they got on my radar. Two of my favorite filmmakers at the moment.
And Damien, when did you decide to take your short? Did you make the short knowing that you were going to make a feature? Because the actor is what's his name?
J.K. Simmons.
Yeah, he's in both the short and the feature as well. So was it with the idea of this is just kind of like a test piece or a calling card, or?
Yeah, I'd written the feature script, and it was really just, it's not the easiest pitch to sort of raise money for a movie about a jazz. It's about a jazz drummer, and people would ask, couldn't it be about a rock drummer or something? And so it was kind of trying to convince them that a movie about music, or let alone jazz, could be exciting. We found that the best way to do it would just be to take a scene from the script that could sort of stand on its own a little bit, and shoot it with whatever means we could as a short. So we did that last summer, and took it to Sundance, so last year's Sundance. So it was really kind of done as a sales tool, really. And taking it to Sundance was kind of like a sort of added bonus that I hadn't been expecting, that was, just awesome and made me really want to come back with the feature.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. The sort of the traditional way of thinking about shorts from an industry point of view is it's either sort of it's experience in terms of just going out and exercising and developing your chops, or it's a calling card. That's you make a cool short and that leads to people being interested in your work. But I think what we're seeing more and more of now is these kind of like proof of concept, essentially, shorts that are meant to be part of or to lead to a feature version or a longer version of that material. Certainly from a financing point of view, when I'm trying to put together feature films, having some kind of work to demonstrate what the product might look like is essential. I mean, studios and financiers have always wanted to see as much as they can before they lay their capital down, and that hasn't changed. But I think what's changed is sort of the lower barrier for being able to do these kinds of things, and now all the platforms and sort of shareable formats of being able to get people interested in your work.
And Chris, you were telling me before the panel that you've had 2 shorts here, and you were telling me you had ideas of turning one of them into a feature, or maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, actually, it's a little bit different, I guess, than what Damien and Kat went through, because when I was here with The Strange Ones, which is the short that I'm now endeavoring to turn into a feature, I didn't necessarily plan for it to ever become a feature. It was just an idea that I had that I thought would be like a really good short. And one of the great sort of like things about the response that we got to the short, like it played like many festivals, and like a common sort of reaction was that people wanted to see more. They thought it was a story that could support a longer narrative, and it's similar to the short I have here this year in that it's sort of a very contained narrative, but it's kind of like mysterious and leaves you hanging a little bit. And so like people always want to know sort of like what is going to happen next, and so but it's actually been an interesting and difficult process, like for me, translating that short into a feature, just because it wasn't part of my initial sort of conception of the material. And the material itself was conceived to support, like it was conceived to end when it did, you know what I mean? So, and a lot of the core mystery of that film works because it ends there and doesn't tell you anything more. So like one of my sort of big challenges in writing the feature script, which I'm still working on, is how to sustain that type of drama, which is what everybody responded to in the short, but on a feature-length scale. So, that's sort of been what I've been trying to figure out and trying to, not that I never it wasn't something that people were like, you should make a feature, and I decided to do it just because like it would be easy or because like people were asking for it. It was something that the more I thought about it, the more I agreed and really wanted to do it, and thought that the characters and the situation and the sort of dramatic concept would be an interesting thing. And the short was always sort of made to be emblematic of the type of feature that I would want to make. So in that way, I guess it was meant to be somewhat of a calling card, and it was like, this is a sort of like kind of creepy, mysterious sort of feature that I think I would make as my first feature. So yeah, I don't know.
And that always, personally, I've never taken a short to a feature. They've always kind of been these little ideas or whatever that we can never conceive in a longer format. So I don't have the experience of doing it. And what I'm curious is that challenge, that what translates from the short into the feature. What do you keep? What do you keep? What do you take away? Is even in far as like character development or writing or even cast or whatever. I know sometimes the translation it could be a difficult one. So I know you two have done it already. So why don't you guys talk about it?
I guess one thing that was helpful for us is that so we had this script that that I'd sort of been revising for a while, and in a way, beyond just doing the short in order to raise some money, it was also a way to get our feet wet a little bit and figure out what worked and what didn't work. And there were certain things that we shot for the short that didn't wind up in the short, and so correspondingly, the script was kind of revised to reflect the short more. It sort of taught us what you needed and what you didn't need. But as a result of that kind of fine tuning, the thing that became the weird part of the process was that when we went on set to shoot the feature, we had already shot that scene and shot it exactly kind of the way that we wanted to shoot it. So shots are kind of, a good chunk of the scene in the feature is shot for shot the same as in the short. but it helped us trim some of the fat and kind of fine tune it a little bit.
The short of Hellion is at the core a father-son story, but the tone of it is very different from the feature. And when you're making a short, like the Hellion short was 6 minutes long, which is tiny. You're just trying to cram in so much story and so much character development into like 6 tiny little minutes and like 6 tiny little pages. And so I remember when I was writing this short script, for a feature script, I spend like anywhere from 10 to 15 drafts on it. I spent probably about 10 drafts on 6 pages of a short. And you're just like constantly kind of trying to really hone like what's the character, every single little character arc, the theme, like really honing in on the theme of your story, making sure every little tiny moment and piece kind of comes back to that theme. And so I think even though the feature is somewhat different, having that sort of core, I use like one words a lot for sort of my story structure. And sort of having those one words in the short, it was all about confidence, and in the feature, it's all about responsibility. And sort of having that taped to my laptop, and always kind of coming back to how every single character deals with responsibility or irresponsibility. So it's having that very defined, clear through line. But then for me, with the feature, it was really going down to Southeast Texas. I think I love the process of going to a place and just like letting the characters and the world just kind of, you just soak it up, and you find so many subtleties and so many details that you would never in a million years have come up with on your own, because you're just sitting, I talk about this a lot. I was sitting in a barbershop where all, like Blaine's barbershop, right, Kelly, and who his dad has gone to for probably like 20 or 30, 40 years, I don't know. And you have refinery workers coming in and out, and I just sat there with like a little composition book and had like pages and pages of notes of like just conversations and phrases that they say and all these little details that I would never have come up with if I hadn't been sitting in Blaine's barbershop with Kelly's dad for like 2 hours.
And when you guys are working, when you find a short filmmaker or you find somebody who's done a short that they want to turn into a feature, how do you ever get into a situation where you're working in against the original vision or with it? You know what I mean? Like, is there any situation where that short was great, but you need this much more, or that short was, because Kat's story is very interesting, I think, because of how different the short and the feature were, having seen both. I was actually waiting for some things from the short to pop back up, and then and I've also seen examples of scenes being repeated in a short or in a feature that were done in a short, and it there's a difficulty there. So, but have you guys ever had any like experience having that discussion with a filmmaker prior to making that step from short to feature?
Yeah, I mean, I'm having that conversation currently with a client who has a great short film that's sort of post-apocalyptic and I think is a very great story for that. I don't think it's necessarily one that lends itself to a feature, and I think that's feedback that he's gotten repeatedly, but he's taking the characters that he's sort of played with and the central relationship and moving it to a different world and opening it up that way. So I do think it's specific to each story and whether it makes more sense. And I've been thinking a lot this week as I see a lot of movies that, what really justifies a feature film and some, asking an audience to spend 90 minutes with these people and what is it really about and what are you exploring within that. So I think it's story by story and kind of case by case, but I think about it a lot and I have those conversations and arguments a lot. A movie that I worked on at Sundance that I think hits what you're talking about is Pariah, where there are shorts, and that was a great example of one, and Damien's is as well, where the short is just a scene, and it leaves you wanting a lot more. And I think, Chris, I was a huge fan of The Strange Ones as well. And so with shorts like that, you leave the audience really wanting to know more, and that is the one that I would say absolutely explore as a feature. So. For me...
when I hear a pitch, I usually encourage the filmmaker or writer, whoever, to just come in and tell the story, and don't tell me whether it's a short or a feature or a TV show or whatever. And then once we hear the story and talk through what it's about, then you kind of sort of figure out what format it lends itself to. And I think, so, with that in mind, there's no shame in a short film that doesn't, necessarily lend itself to a feature film. I think it's important to keep in mind that they're totally different formats. And, just because somebody can tell a great story in 6 minutes doesn't necessarily mean that they're immediately going to be able to go make a feature film. As these guys have indicated, there's a tremendous amount of work in sort of adapting and figuring out what the core qualities of a short film are if you're trying to turn it into a feature. But at the same time, there's sort of voracious desire for all sorts of different kinds of short form content. I'm interested in filmmakers who are interested in working entirely in that format.
Really?
Yeah.
No, it's interesting how, when technology evolves, there are more opportunities for the short format to get out there, and for that audience to be found. And I'm curious, have you guys ever had any experience with that in terms of like trying to reach an audience and do a project that wasn't necessarily as much, a scene from your film or something like that, or maybe more like a learning experience or a something that you can use to reach more people, broader, like black metal is here, and I don't know if you have a feature version of that.
That's what I'm working on right
Okay, well then never mind. But I mean, and you've done tons of shorts. I'm sure everybody has. But I mean, what do you do with the short that you don't necessarily use as like a calling card?
I had a short called Love Bug prior to being at Sundance. That was, it actually is a scene from another kid comedy that I wrote, and that played the kids circuit, like huge kids circuit. And probably the coolest thing that happened off of that short was when Sesame Street called me and was like, "I saw your short Love Bug, and we really loved it, and we'd love you to pitch stuff to Sesame Street." Nothing ever happened, but it was so fucking cool that Sesame Street called off of this short that had been on the circuit for like 2 or 3 years already. So you have no clue like who's gonna see it and how far it's gonna reach. That was Sesame Street calling is kind of badass.
Any experience with a film that you had no intention with turning into a feature? Because it seems like we've been talking a lot about that. I'm just kind of trying to see the other end of it.
I guess the main my main experience in that realm was with The Strange Ones before we started thinking of it as a feature, and like it ended up getting out there to like mostly through festivals and stuff, and like but then it also got sold for television in like Europe and stuff, and like that was something we never sort of really realized would even be possible, and stuff like that. And I had when I premiered The Strange Ones here, we met a production company that was then interested in potentially working on a web series with us that was sort of in the same vein, and that was something that we had talked about for a little while and hasn't really happened, but it's still something in the back of my head, like just the viability of like a web series and being able to sort of it seems to translate really well with shorts, because you still get to work in a short format, like episode by episode, but you still get to tell a larger story, and like but maybe not to the extent of like a full-on TV show or whatever. Like I just watched the other day Catherine, which is here in the shorts program, which is a really great web series with Jenny Slate, and each episode is like 2 minutes long, and they're like really hilarious. There's like 12 episodes, so it's like a web series. It's like the length of one or 12 short films, you know what I mean? So to me, I think there's like a lot of opportunity in that realm, you know, that the short that I have here now is something that now people are starting to ask me if I wanted to turn that into a feature, and in my head I'm like, yeah, it could be like a feature, it could be a web series, it could be something, I don't know, just like this more serial form of like storytelling where you could do like 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 8 minutes or 22 minutes episodes. I think is a really interesting new sort of opportunity.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. So.
I mean, I actually haven't had any experience with it. I mean, I made some shorts in school that were, quickly put in a drawer for the good reasons. But so the only short I did that anyone ever saw was Whiplash, and again, that wasn't made with the intention of people seeing it. Really, it was made specifically with the intention of showing it to a few money people, and done purely for that reason. So everything that followed from that was sort of a surprise, to be honest.
But I mean, even making shorts in school is like, a valuable experience. I never went to film school personally, and my experience was just going out and getting a camera and making shorts with my brother, et cetera. So, I think that, even that experience, the failures, I mean, we've had a few films here at Sundance, but many, many, many others that have not been. So, I mean, I think there is, for us personally, it was a means to, kind of explore our voice, kind of explore what kind of films we wanted to make. So I think there's a value in having that kind of rejection and that kind of misstep as well. On the financing side, do you ever go the other way, and maybe you've got a first-time director or a writer or somebody that wants to make a film, and do you ever push them in the direction of trying out a scene or trying out an idea in the short form first as a means to practice or to test?
Yeah, without a doubt. Like I sort of started to say earlier, I just think that a lot of things are changing in the financial marketplace at the moment. Obviously, the sort of world of films that are getting made at the studios is shrinking and shrinking. And so there's a lot of investment opportunity out there, but I would say compared to 6 or 8 years ago, there's financiers who are pretty savvy. And they look for these kinds of proof of concepts, whether it's prior work or actual work that's specifically related to the feature version that we're trying to package and fundraise for. So I'm always in favor of having some kind of material like that, even if it's not necessarily a scene or a narrative short film, if it's some kind of even video introduction about what the piece is. I just find that certainly always helps.
Cullen, have you ever had any experiences?
Thanks. Yeah, no, I have the same experience with my clients when I'm trying to convince someone to pay to let them make their movie. I think it's a really great tool to have, and similarly, if I'm looking at someone that I'm considering working with, it's very similar. Of do they show real talent and promise? So I think it's great. On the flip side, I get frustrated sometimes by that idea of putting that person through that work that I already know is really talented. But at the same time, it's great experience and it's lower risk and there are less stakes in that sense. Ideally, if you're shooting a short, it's a lot less money. People who invest in it, and especially if you do it on Kickstarter, they're not expecting a return because financially it's hard to really have a return on a short. But that's something that we did, the labs, the directing labs especially, it's a place where you can fail and no one ever sees it. So really just getting up on your feet. And the other thing that I think is I would imagine is very frustrating as a filmmaker is similar to actors, the amount of time that you actually get to do what you love to do, which is to direct, is in the grand scheme of things not that frequent. So it's also just getting you back out there and doing what you love to do and getting more experience of that.
Yeah, sorry. The other thing that I'm thinking about is there's a, I guess, relatively recent tradition, certainly over the last 5 years or so, of these sort of incredibly high concept, almost like trailer for studio level films that you see coming out of, all over the place, a lot from overseas, but they sort of demonstrate, unreal technical, proficiency and world creation kind of imagination. They don't necessarily have story integrity on their own, but they demonstrate this kind of sensibility that's really appealing at a studio level. And the way those are disseminated via YouTube and social media is just completely bypassing some of the more traditional ways that new filmmakers with those kinds of skills kind of build up their careers. I mean, you see deals being offered to filmmakers on on the heels of a 3-minute sort of visual effects short.
Yeah, like high concept, and there's a slew of films out,
Mama and District 9. I mean,
District 9 is a big one. Yeah, so like that's always interesting, and yet they're able to show what they can do with a very modest budget and how much high quality they can get. It's part of it is also that they kind of know where they want to go with it. Like they know they may want to be a more commercial director, or they know who they're targeting with the audience. So there's that thing I think that people should really take into account when they're making a short film as well. Is like, what is the end result that you want from it? So.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think Steve makes a good point, and it's on a personal level. I almost never respond to those things. And they feel very gimmicky, but then I sit as all of my colleagues and everyone else around town goes insane for it. So there's something to really be said for that. And then, I think it's a different type of filmmaker than I typically am drawn to, but it leads to great success for them, and they get to make a movie with a real budget, with a studio, having never done that before. And like Steve said, they didn't have to go through the process of making something smaller, and they're able to show something very commercial in a short amount of time. So yeah, it's very valid.
A lot of those films never play the festival circuit.
Oh, no.
They don't go the festival route.
No, not at all.
And that's an interesting thing. So how do you guys find a lot of your short filmmakers, or how do you see short films? Because obviously at Sundance, and festivals, there's a platform for them. And now that there's the YouTube and more technology, and people are used to sitting down at their computers and watching, there's an audience outside of that as well. So do you guys focus solely on the festivals, or mix and match, or is there discovery? How does your discovery process go?
For me personally, I am in contact with all the film schools, so I know that's sort of that can be a limited range because it's a lot of money, and but I scour and keep in touch with them and ask for recommendations from those professors and grad school programs, festivals obviously, and recommendations. I mean, I know that about myself, that I'm probably not the person scouring the internet that comes across that short first, but once someone else does, hopefully they send it my way and I watch it quickly. So, but I know a lot of managers in LA who are very good at that. I don't know the sites off the top of my head, but there are some that they just sort of sit on and scroll through, and they find really interesting material that way.
Yeah, it's a little of both for me. I mean, I think there probably was a time when sort of Sundance and then the end of the year Academy Award nominated films that sort of went around the landmark theaters or whatever. That was sort of the way to see short films. And I first learned kind of representation from this great agent named Christina Bazdikas, and the first thing she did when she came to Sundance was go see the shorts programs. Just because, it felt like, and I sort of started to realize the same, that the voices you would encounter there, the storytelling chops, the sort of facility with visual gags, all that stuff was demonstrated in a really fresh way in the shorts films, and the filmmakers were really approachable. You could sit with them and kind of talk about their aspirations. And so that's always been wonderful for me. But at the same time, I think there's just way more ways to see content now, and it's important to sort of understand as, I guess, developing filmmakers or whatever, that there's an entire class of industry professional whose whole job is just to bring in material. And, who knows where they find all this stuff, but I make friends with them, and, the stuff gets sent around on links and stuff, so that's a lot of it too.
And for the filmmakers, have you guys gotten representation from screening here at Sundance? Because for myself, when I was younger and more naive, I thought, well, you get into Sundance, and then an agent's in the audience, and you talk to them, and then you get signed, and then you make a movie, and blah, 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 blah. Fast forward 10 years later, it's not the same. But have you guys had that kind of experience? Because there are those home runs that you always hear of, and that's kind of like the filmmaker's dream when they come here with a short film. I mean, what's your experience in terms of how the short has helped your career other than just giving you the opportunity to make something?
Yeah, it definitely put me on the radar of a lot of like representation, and started to have those conversations after the short premiered here, and also put it, even like equally tangibly, like you start to meet people that are interested, like producers or production companies or people that have seen the short and are interested in what you have to do next. So I think I don't know, for me it wasn't like kind of like the classic sort of like Sundance home run of like you get signed at the festival and like get a feature deal or whatever like right off the bat. But it was sort of like, because I screened here, I've been in touch with several people that can sort of help me take the next step to that, to sort of, I guess, to where these guys are now. So
Yeah, I don't have representation right now, and when I was here with Hellion, I definitely talked to people, and I think I got on the radar is what it was. And you guys can probably speak better in terms of like radars and how all of that kind of works. I don't know, but you make a short and people get excited and they love it, but it's still a lot of hard work beyond that. Made another short that was here again. We had a lot of great folks commenting on it, and still after that continue to work your ass off. And then I mean it's I don't know. I don't know the classic story of the short filmmaker. Were you that? I think you're constantly you're always working your butt off because it's so freaking hard. I teach. I meant to say this earlier to you. I teach at the University of Texas in Austin, and I teach short filmmaking. And kind of back to your question about discovering stuff, I discovered The Strange Ones at South by Southwest in 2011, and I kind of stalked these guys, him and Lauren Wilkstein, who I think are, if you haven't seen The Strange Ones, it's like such a phenomenal short film. And I remember thinking like, I want to be like those guys I'm serious, I did. And then I show The Strange Ones in my class every single semester because it's such a badass short film, and it's all about really amazing storytelling. And I think.
No, I mean I had sort of representation going into Sundance with the short, so it was sort of a different thing. But I mean, it was still kind of a shock to me, I guess, how powerful a short can be for people, because I'd had a feature in 2009 that I did the festival circuit with, and I had the kind of naive dream with the feature that I'm even better off than with a short. I mean, it's a feature, and I'm gonna get an agent, and it's all gonna happen overnight. Obviously, it didn't happen, and what was funny was that, and the feature was well received, and eventually through various kinds of, through a chain of events that it did set off, eventually I did sort of secure some kind of representation, very indirectly. But what was funny coming to Sundance with the short last year was sort of, everyone kind of assuming it was my first thing I'd ever done, and this year I'm sort of here. Like a lot of people sort of ask me, like, what's it like doing your first feature? And after having done a short, like, what did it feel like? They didn't know I'd actually gone backwards, from feature to short, and just the short last year sort of gave me a certain amount of visibility that the feature never had. But I think there is something about the kind of power of a short to, I mean, you watch them quickly. You watch them even quicker than you read a script, and so I think that actually counts a lot for what Colin is saying about this new sort of trend of shorts that people scour. I think it's a very sort of quick, efficient delivery system for certain ideas. It also has to do with people not really being willing to read, which is a problem of its own. But it's here to stay, I think.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And to piggyback on what Kat was saying, I think it's honestly a different skill set in science doing a short film and making a really good short versus making a very strong feature, because you have, by nature, you have more time to explore things in the feature. And I think Chris did a very great job in The Strange Ones of telling a story very succinctly and surprising the audience. And that's something, if these are filmmakers in the audience that are thinking about what do I want my short to be, I think it's really thinking like, what is the concept here? What's going to surprise people and really, get them excited and take them aback a little bit, as opposed to telling, a nice quiet story that in a longer feature people are more patient. I'm oddly way more impatient when I watch a short. Like if I start it and it says 20 minutes, I'm like, really 20-minute short. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it's just by nature. If I go in thinking I'm watching a short film, I want it to be short and have some energy and surprise me. And I mean, that's obviously just me personally, but it's a weird thing. There's definitely a different mindset when you're making a short that I think you really need to have, and that is the story comes first and how to tell it succinctly. Because I'm sure everybody has this experience, especially as it gets more accessible. You see that 20-minute mark, it's like, I don't have time to watch this short. No one has any time anymore. And that's why they don't read. Yeah. And a lot of the times the longer shorts, it has to be very, very well done, to play. And I've heard this from programmers as well, from festivals. They can't program a long short. It's hard to put in front of a feature. It's hard to balance a shorts block with it. And most of the time they end up, being, a longer idea kind of crammed into a short format, and it just does not work. So that wasn't even a question. So my little thing. Do we want to open up to the audience for anybody have any questions in the audience for anyone up here? Yeah, monetizing shorts. Is there a way?
I didn't say that exactly. What I said is that people are watching a lot of stuff, and a lot of it is short form stuff. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you would call what Casey Neistat does, for example, short films per se, but he's doing short form work, kind of on his own terms, and that's purely what he does. And he's an incredible storyteller who does all kinds of interesting things, and has a large and loyal following that subscribe to everything that he does. And so I guess what I was trying to get at is that this idea that short form content has its kind of own set of rules, its own format. And I think that there's a desire amongst consumers of content to find new voices and to follow it, to follow those people that are creating it. So there are auteurs of short form stuff. Now, if the question is about making money on it, it's people want to see it. I don't know if they want to pay for it. I'm not sure that they don't. Certainly there are sales agents overseas who package and sell shorts in Europe. There are television sales to be done, and we've attempted to do some kind of clever things in terms of packaging some common shorts in the U.S. and figuring out how to release them digitally. And then there's the ad kind of based model as well.
Has anyone else made any money off of their short form work? None whatsoever. It's difficult. The channels aren't really there. Like there isn't. People don't go to the theater. People don't pay for them online usually. But I do have some experience working with folks that are like they build up an audience of their own online, and then they're able to monetize that, and it's working in the short format. Because I'm sure there is an example, but I can't think of one off the top of my head of the long format working with putting it online on your own without other channels or other distribution methods. Like just, I know that there's this would probably change tomorrow as technology evolves, but the idea of putting a feature that with no audience built in or advertising and expecting to make money off of it online is just as impossible as putting a short online and expecting the same thing. So
yeah.
But I do think people are sort of figuring out how to use the channels to build an audience along the way in the process of creating a feature film, so that there is some kind of built-in subscriber base, whether it's a channel on YouTube, or whether you've done crowdfunding, and you just have sort of people that are ready to evangelize about the finished product. And I do think that is the way that things are going.
And I think, there used to, in a way, be a built-in distribution model for short form, and that was, music videos on TV, really. And I think the drying up of that has sort of both limited options for short form work, but also spread the wealth much more. And I think, and the rise of online and everything, it's a different world now, where it used to be, I think most people's encounter with short form work and beginning filmmakers doing stuff that wasn't features was through the music videos that would play on MTV and VH1 and so on and so forth. And it's not the case anymore. Now it's all online.
And you don't, do people pay for music videos? I know Kat, you've done some, and just one. But why did you do it?
Because my friend asked me to. I'd never done it before. Actually, it was for a band called Ola Padrita. David Wingo, who's a composer, fantastic composer, he had asked us to make, kind of like you guys, music video, and we used that music video as sort of a test shoot for Hellion. So we took the music video down to Southeast Texas and Port Neches and found some kids to be in the music video, and just shot that as sort of a test. So it kind of was a nice twofold opportunity to do something I'd never done before and use it to test out camera and lenses and all of that kind of stuff. You have a question? That's a hard question. It's an awesome question, and it's a really hard question too.
I had to
think
deal with
both of us, because the adult lead in our short is in our feature, but is not the adult lead, and it's something that I think, I'm just guessing, that probably both of us had to go through, because I freaking love Johnny Mars, who plays the father in the short, and I think he's one of the best actors I've ever worked with. He's fantastic. But in order to, a feature film and having a budget, you have, names and people that can draw an audience as well. And it's a really, really tough transition in that respect, with actors that you work with who you just think the world of and absolutely love and adore and are so incredibly talented, and you want people to know who they are. But
that sounds very familiar in a way, because sort of in a way half of our of the two leads of my feature, one of them was in the short, one of them was not. I think you always kind of, you go in wanting that sort of ideal scenario where the same exact cast you had in the short will just translate into the feature, and it'll be one big happy reunion, and it'll be the same crew, and it'll just be like a family. That is if the experience of making the short is a positive one, which in my case it certainly was. It sounds like in Kat's it was. But, life gets in the way, and the industry gets in the way. And I was lucky in that I at least didn't feel my hand being forced by economics, just for the specific reason that this actor, Miles Teller, who's the lead in my film, who was not in the short, was someone who I'd actually had in mind when I was writing it back in, way before. So it worked out in a nice way in that sense, but it doesn't always, and it's really difficult. And the guy who plays his role in the short is a brilliant actor named Johnny Simmons, who knocked it out of the park and created a vision of the character for me that I had a hard time shaking. And Miles redefined the character, and I fell in love with that. But I so enjoyed the experience of working with Johnny that for a while that was the character in my mind.
But also, for me personally, Johnny Mars being in the short, I was taking him with them, and I pretty much wrote a role for him in the feature. Because when you find people that you love and adore and who are so incredibly talented, you try and figure out how to take everybody with you, which is important to me.
Yeah, I just on that subject, for some of the reasons we've talked about, investors in short films typically aren't looking to make their money back or expecting to make their money back. investors in a feature film are almost always looking to make their money back. And so, there's just different financial considerations, but it's without a doubt a truth that when you have financial considerations like that, that becomes part of that's an essential quality of the production planning, and you have to make choices that sort of address those concerns.
In my case, the producer had a friend who, just wrote a check. It was easy. I mean, it was very, very cheap. Our short was one location, one room. So just throw a couple people in a room, shoot it on video, and that was it. But in our case, the way we convinced the person who did finance the short was, they were there for the long haul. They knew that it was going to be a feature. I don't know, and I'd be curious to find out what the process is like for a short that is really just a standalone short. In this case, it was, help us make this feature. You will be a producer on the feature. Just help us get, this is the initial investment in a way that will pay off for the feature. So we did have kind of a promise in that sense, but I don't know what it's like in other circumstances.
The last 3 shorts that I did, Love Bug, the children's circuit one, I spent $800 at a bunch of friends who were like, yeah, let's go make something. And that was all out of my pocket. Hellion, we did Indiegogo, and we also got a grant from the Austin Film Society. So if anybody's from Texas, you should absolutely investigate the Austin Film Society and the Austin Film Grant. And then with Black Metal, it was a little bit bigger budget. We had one investor, not donor, really, yeah. And Indiegogo again, and then we got another grant from the Austin Film Society as well.
And were any of your people who gave money for Hellion, I mean, were they involved with the feature at all, or?
No.
For me, I know that's a good question. I think with The Strange Ones being starting out as just a standalone short, like, we first intended to pay for it just out of our own pocket, and it was supposed to be doable for like very little money, like maybe a couple $1,000s, and I think in a general sense that is one very viable way people pay for their shorts, just on their own, with credit cards or whatever. We were lucky enough that we got a producer on board who liked the script, and then he found like financing for the short just as a short that was much more than what we initially intended it to be, so we were able to kind of expand on it and everything. And then for my new short, it happened, the only real reason I was able to make it was because I had an executive producer who liked the script and agreed to put up the like $10,000 that it cost to make the movie. So that is like a case of like one short leading to the other, But I think in a general sense, what most people do these days, I went to film school and I graduated film school a few years ago, and it's always, film school is very expensive and making your own films is very expensive. So it's always a question like, how are you actually going to pay for this? Because you have to make a film to graduate film school, but you're already like, in my case, I was already $150,000 in debt, you know what I mean? And like, increasingly it's all about like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, knowing rich people, or like having family members that know people, or having rich family members. So yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, the Europeans are fortunate to have incredible subsidy systems, and so you see some really awesome shorts coming out of Europe that are financed largely through government funds, which obviously we don't have. So, more often than not, it's friends and family, it's self-financed, there are grants, it's Kickstarter and Indiegogo. There are people out there who, are patrons of the arts, so to speak, who want to be involved with an artist kind of at the nascent stage of their career. But yeah, typically, like I said, I don't think that they're looking at their involvement in a short film as an investment, as much as kind of supporting an artist that they want to be involved with.
I think like 9 times out of 10, when people are endeavoring to make a short film, they're doing some form of crowdfunding these days.
And begging.
Yeah.
I still think that the film festival circuit has a lot of viability and importance for short films, just because places like this are just a meeting place of so many people across so many different facets of the business. And well, there are ways that you can sort of replicate some of those qualities using social media and other things. There really is no substitute for sitting down face to face with somebody who comes up to you at the end of a screening and says, "Hey, I love what you just did." And I was just thinking about the issue of representation, which came up earlier. I have signed clients off of short films, but it's also sometimes not just about representation. I've seen short films at a festival where the director just kind of stuck in my head, and then that person ends up appearing on a list that I'm doing as a potential director for a project that a producer client is putting together. And so you just never know in a situation like this who you're going to talk to and who's going to be a fan of what you're working on.
The other alternative is putting it on YouTube and trying to sort of get it out in the world. And the nice thing, I think, if you do that route and then people discover it and love it, is, I know with Sundance, for example, they'll still program something that's been out in the world. It no longer has to be like no one has seen this. So those rules have shifted a little bit. It used to be, from what I understand, like it needed to be a world premiere, and now they're more open to, let's just share this with an audience because we love it, and maybe they haven't seen it yet. So.
But I mean, honestly, I would push for the festival circuit, because the thing that's most valuable, I know that for me, has been meeting the other filmmakers. Because you grow up, I mean, Nathan Zellner and I have known each other for well over a decade, and we met, I mean, you meet other filmmakers, you befriend each other, and you're there for each other for years and years and years and years. And the other thing too is you'll find, like, we played Hellion at South by in 2012. A DP came up to me and was like, "I really love your work. I'd really love to work with you." He ended up shooting Black Metal the next year, and now he's here with a film called Rich Hill. That's what happens at festivals, and that's probably one of the most important things that you'll ever get at a festival, is the other people that you're going to work with. Be unique. Tell stories we haven't seen, characters we haven't seen. Go to festivals, watch a ton of short films, and you'll see like what you're seeing over and over and over again. And don't do that.
Yeah, I would say, I think somebody earlier said, like, something about not trying to cram a short into a feature, and I think one thing that I've learned just from making shorts and seeing a bunch of shorts at festivals and stuff, like the best ones are the ones that take advantage of the format of a short, and that like are a story that can't be told necessarily at a feature length, even if it's like a scene from a feature. If it's a good scene, that would stand alone as a short, it's like so much better to do that than try to, sort of invent an entire sort of three-act structure and narrative into a very short period of time. And I think the beauty of short filmmaking is that it's slightly experimental in what you can do compared to a feature. So whenever I'm like thinking about what I would make as a short, it's always sort of like, well, why is this like a good short, and what do I really want to focus on in this that I wouldn't be able to focus on in a feature? It's like, in a way, it's like, even though features are so much more expansive than shorts, you have an opportunity, like, for instance, like, my new short is basically one scene, and it's like, I had an opportunity in the short to sort of, like, really focus on that one scene in probably a much more intense way than I would have if there was a whole feature around it, So I think just in terms of, like, conceptualizing your ideas for shorts, that is kind of, like, something that I often think about.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, yeah, I would agree with both. I mean, just make, even if it is a scene or something that's some kind of a calling card or what have you for a feature, the shorts that work best are the ones that could only be shorts, and you'd think that'd be obvious, but you see a lot of shorts and it seems to not be obvious, and there seems to be a lot of damage that screenplay manuals do to shorts filmmakers who think it applies to them. It really is a different medium, and the same way that television is different from theatrical film and the music videos are different from commercials, etc. It's shorts are not just shorter features; they're a complete beast unto themselves. And But I think a lot of my, I don't know if most, but at least half of my favorite films I've ever seen in my life are shorts, and I think it's something about how a single image or a single moment or a single scene or a single exchange can say more than 90 minutes or 100 minutes ever could, and any short that's worth its money should be doing that.
Parting words. I guess I'm thinking about the title of this panel, Why Shorts Matter. And it had never really occurred to me that shorts didn't matter. Because, like, honestly, shorts are an integral tool and, content that I'm dealing with every single day. In terms of talent discovery, certainly, but as a tool in putting together finance and demonstrating the qualities of a filmmaker's vision and sensibility. And so, I think that those are things that in the best shorts are apparent. The best shorts have their own integrity, like these guys have said. And, to me, any content, any story that has integrity and works on its own terms has an audience and will be seen.
I don't know that I have a lot to add. I think seconding all of that and just thinking about it as an introduction to people of who you are and what you want to say, and I use the word voice a lot in terms of what I'm looking for and what I think most people are looking for, but it's what is your perspective on the world and what are you exploring and doing it within a short format, but yeah, just striving to be original and also singular in what you're making, so that people know, oh wow, that's a unique perspective, and it can only come from this person.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.